One. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Delusions of Grandeur. I'm your host, David Strege, and here we have a discussion that we are going to do about the space opera from the 1980s uh, called Flash Gordon, which this is actually not the first time that Flash Gordon has graced the screen. But get away, Ginger Dead Man. Gary Busey and his dumbass. Anyways. But anyways, so Flash Gordon is a film that I actually first saw on Laserdisc, believe it or not. It was filmed in the like I said, 1980. And it was a British, Dutch, and American film production, and it was based on the King Features comic strip of the same name. It was created by Alex Raymond originally, but the film itself was directed by Mike Hodges and produced by Dino De Laurentiis. The film was shot in Technicolor and Todd AO 35. And it stars Sam Jones, Melody Anderson, Topol, Max von Sydow, Timothy Dalton, Brian Blessed, and Omela Muti. Why don't before we go into anything, why don't I just give a synopsis of the film that IMDb says right here. So, a football player and his friends travel to the planet Mongo and find themselves fighting the tyranny of Ming the Merciless to save Earth. So, I'm going to go over to Jake. Now, was this a first time watch for you?
It was indeed.
Okay.
It's definitely the first.
What did you think of the production? What was your first thoughts on the film?
Well, it was interesting. It was interesting. It was definitely cheesy. Definitely it had its definite moments and mostly entertaining.
Okay.
Yep.
Pretty
cool soundtrack.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Brandon, why don't you tell me your first? Was this your first experience with this film?
Not my first experience per se, but I mean, my first experience with the film would have probably been with on a tape my father had, which was a Queen's Greatest Hits tape. And then I got majorly into the band Queen when I was in high school. So I had to track it down. And of course, it's actually considered, I mean, this here is actually considered one of their albums or studio albums, even though there's only like really 2 songs that have any words or lyrics on them. That would be like the hero and, of course, the Flash main theme. And there are several edits of that song. And I used to have a copy of this particular, both of them, but I seem to have lost the other. I had a car wreck a while back, and all of my CDs got just trashed. This is about what 2002 maybe that happened. So it's been a while. But so I've always wanted to see it, and then I watched what was it, Ted?
Okay.
Which also brought it up again and again. So I had to get into it. And then when I heard that y'all were covering it, I said, you know what? This is my chance to finally get the darn thing. So I got it. And then I watched it.
Okay?
It's a very colorful film
It is very colorful.
with a good soundtrack. I like the soundtrack.
Well, my first experience with it is when I lived in Oak Creek. I There was another guy. His name was Bruce, and we were friends for some time. And he had every game system imaginable, and he was like 48 years old. And he had a disability, but and he lived with his mother, but he had like the coolest shit. And he had a Laserdisc player, and that was the first time I'd ever had anything to do with a Laserdisc. And so he had Flash Gordon on Laserdisc, and we watched it one night. And that was the first time I'd actually ever seen this film, and I hadn't seen it since. Believe it or not, I think I watched it maybe once, maybe 10 years ago, and it was maybe like 10 years before that I had actually seen this. So this may actually be my third time watching a film, but I actually did pick up Flash Gordon on its Savior of the Universe edition, which is kind of a fancy box, which may not be the best to keep your DVD in, because it's just planted in there.
Oh, paper sleeve. It's not terrible, I guess.
It's not terrible, but
it's not paper sleeves, at least.
Yeah,
paper sleeves are just like crap.
And it came with like a drawing that's kind of cool from the original drawings, storyboards of the film. So,
well, Jake has my copy of it.
Yeah, at the moment.
Well, it should at least be in everyone's collection, I think, because it is a colorful film. To me, the costumes are somewhat Judge Dredd-ish. Just a little bit, the Stallone Judge Dredd, not the remake.
I have stuff to say about costume design once we get to that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, BAFTA nominated costumes.
For good reason, depending. But the costume design in this film was uneven. I have to say it was very uneven, because there were some costumes that were downright elaborate and very well done. And then there were other costumes, like the lizard men outfits, that were god awful, like right out of the episodes of Star Trek. And I mean, like the original series Star Trek. That level.
So this is not one of those. I mean that in a good way.
So let's start with the plot here. So apparently we have a quarterback who just has on one of those Brady Bunch T-shirts that says Flash Gordon on it. Where him and his somewhat, is she a reporter or I know she's his
travel. I think a travel agent.
Travel agent.
Yeah.
Travel agent.
They just happen to be on like the same plane or something. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And Flash Gordon is played by young blonde Sam Jones, and accompanied by his sometime girlfriend or whatnot, Dale Arden, who is played by Melody Anderson, and she is very pretty. And they end up having to somehow use the phone in Dr. Zarkov's spaceship, and he just kind of shanghais them off to space, because he believes that the Earth is going to be destroyed in a matter of days.
More, their plane crashes into his laboratory, and they're like, "We need a phone. Oh, it's in here."
Yeah. And I just keep thinking I'm watching Retevia do something traditional, you know. But they end up having to shoot off into space, and that's when they are when they come through a fiery was it a fiery universe, or was it a nebula that they went through? I was trying.
Sea of Fire or something.
Yeah,
like
the Sea of Fire, which evidently, by the time they had actually gone through the Sea of Fire, they were actually being their ship was in fact being controlled by the Emperor Ming's control planet ship, whatever, and they end up becoming prisoner of this Emperor Ming, who was played by Max von Sydow.
Mhm.
More reason why this would not hold up today.
Nope. It's not the first time von Sydow has played a
Chinese
ethnically dubious role.
Oh gosh, I keep thinking about the role that Peter Sellers played. Was it Peter Sellers that did that and there was a
the
movie
Charlie
like
Chan knockoff?
Yeah.
Are you talking about
was that in
Murder by Death?
Yep, Murder by Death. That's the one. Yeah, I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, that was terrible. But
it's not as bad as the original Charlie Chan, but yeah.
In 1980, though, that could still fly. Not today, though.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I mean, shoot, they couldn't even use the original design for the Mandarin for Iron Man 3. And we're talking that was years ago. So
people are still getting over their institutionalized racism toward Asians. It's sad.
Now, supposedly on this planet Mongo, there are two powers that be. One being Emperor Ming, and the other being this metal-faced. Would he be a robot, or I'm trying to think exactly what he was, because he's got an iron face. Mongo is the planet.
Wasn't Mongo the dude from Blazing Saddles?
Mongo like candy.
although I was kind of thinking that African American that we first see get killed, I was kind of thinking like was his character from Blazing Saddles?
I don't know, but yeah, you've got the robot dude was the one that was played by Peter Weingart, right?
I believe so. That was Clytus.
Yeah. And then, of course, I don't know if you said Topol is the one that played
Hans
the doctor.
Hans Zarkov.
Zarkov, yes. And Topol's I've seen him in a couple things. He's a pretty fun actor. One of several.
Fairly younger in here.
Right. I was going to say one of several in the cast who've been involved in one or more Bond films. Including one of the Bonds will show up later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say, his right-hand man and his like stormtroopers, those ones like the golden skull masks.
Yeah.
Right.
Those were really cool looking costumes.
Right.
They were, but
very elaborate.
They reminded me of the Judge Dredd costume that Stallone wore, per se. That's why I kept saying Judge Dredd, because it was that red and gold, and it was very elaborate.
Yeah, that one was taken right out of the comics, which is just as elaborate. Actually, comics are even more over the top.
Right. I never was familiar with these comics, honestly.
So apparently, once the prisoners, Dr. Hans Zarkov, Dale Arden, and Flash Gordon, once they come into the royal room of Planet Mongo, they, at least the palace that is sitting on the planet that they've been controlled to, they enter a circular room where there are several species of Mongolians that are there. One of them.
Did they ever call them Mongolians? I must have missed that.
No, they did not. I just kind of made that up.
Okay.
Mongolians.
Probably a good thing if they didn't go there.
Mongoans. There we go.
Yeah.
Mongoans. But we have, well, there's the African American species. I don't really want to call them a species. I'm not exactly sure what to call their race.
A tribe, really.
A tribe. Okay. Let's say that there are several tribes of Mongos that are in this room, and one of them is a very barbarian looking tribe with wings, gigantic wings.
Hawkman.
And led by Brian Blessed, the perfect role for the man.
Yes.
The man who I last saw in the first season of Black Adam, where he played Richard the was it Richard the Fourth?
Something
I think
like that.
Because it was he was just as bloodthirsty and crazy in that one as well. He almost looks like a Muppet. At least the way that he moves, and it's just perfect for that sort of role.
Right.
I agree. I mean, Brian Blessed has got one of those voices that you kind of just have to distinguish from, and he almost reminds me in voice per se to who was that who played beside Harrison Ford in the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Trying to think. He played.
They played his Egyptian contact.
Yeah, his Egyptian contact.
Yeah, Salah or whatever it is.
Yes.
As John Rhys Davies.
That's who his voice reminds me of. And it's similar, at least to me.
They're both very good at projecting. They have like that deep booming kind of.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that's like I said. One of my favorite parts in this, the part that stuck in my mind, was his battle cry, where it's like half scream and half bellow. Die! It's great. It's like, But I could not, when I hear Hawkman, I cannot not think of the DC characters. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, did they crib these from DC, or did DC crib them from the old Flash Gordon
That's hard
serials?
To say because those serials are an old. But but then again, Hawkman is an old character too, because Golden Age Hawkman is like.
Yeah.
I mean, shoot.
That's an old one.
Back in the 40s, maybe? Or even earlier than that.
Maybe.
So, yeah.
Well, I know that the original Flash Gordon, the first one was with Buster Crabbe in 1936. So that one was called Flash Gordon, and it, I believe, had 12 chapters for its serial. And then Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe, and then there was one more called Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars.
Well, cereal is delicious.
He conquers the universe and then he goes to Mars.
Well, and then somewhere in between there is definitely a 1954 series, a 1996 series, and a cartoon called The Adventures of Flash Gordon. So,
yay! Well, and some of those, had almost as good special effects as I'm displaying here right now.
Right. But
Oh yeah.
anyways, so while they're in this circular room, they apparently, because he is a quarterback, have a football fight. With a metal egg. What did you think of that particular scene?
You don't want to know what I think about that scene.
Yes, I
I
do.
honestly have no recollection of that. I'm
Well,
going to be straightforward. There are going to be several parts of the movie I have no recollection of.
You're probably better off at the end of the day. I was stupid. But it reflects what the character is. I mean, he's a football player, he's a quarterback, all-American guy.
And not only that,
Yeah.
Flash Gordon seems to go through several different shirts throughout the entire thing too. So the first one is this just regular old T-shirt with the word Flash Gordon on it. The second one is a wife beater that I don't know why they call them a wife beater, but shit, it's a sleeveless T-shirt that says Flash Gordon on it, and then he's wearing a different one a little bit later. It's like his shirts get more flashier as time goes on.
Yeah, that is true enough.
Apparently Emperor Ming has taken a fancy to Dale Arden. So
Yeah.
And
Of course
his daughter, who is even more prettier than Dale Arden, at least in my mind, she has taken a liking to our Flash Gordon here and whisks him off to the planet of pleasure. That apparently that she has a private palace that is built for the two of them.
How dare she?
How dare she, right? And on the meanwhile, Dr. Arkov is taken by that K guy, that Colitis dude.
Yeah.
And he is programmed to be a robotic agent of some sort. What do you think about that particular idea?
Highly
I choose to
unnecessary.
believe what I was programmed to believe.
Yes. I felt like they could just have done, your traditional brainwashing instead of the whole, we're going to scrap everything you know, and then we're going to just rebuild you from scratch again. But they wanted him also for what he had. So we're going to get rid of all your knowledge that we want you for, and then put our own stuff on top of it. Nah.
They just hadn't thought this through.
Yeah.
They just hadn't thought it through.
I do think that the scene where Arden is given this pleasure potion, and she gets kind of tipsy, and when Flash Gordon is shown how to telepathically, telekinesis-wise, connect to Miss Arden over frequencies of some sort, to see what she's doing, like he's
what you doing?
He's in the bedroom with his princess lady while she's licking him to death, and he's like, "Hey, so what you doing?"
They're like, "Oh yeah, you're really turning me on." Oh no, I didn't mean you.
Right?
Yeah.
That person that's in the same room as you that you're not supposed to be talking about, and yet you are. But
It's a tangled web we weave.
right.
Indeed.
So apparently they end up somehow on the at the palace that the Hawk people are at. Or am I mistaken by
Like
that?
a big ship or sky ship or some stuff like that.
Yeah, and somehow the princess. Oh wait,
They're
no,
all like floating islands. It's
no.
like Idalas.
There is
They all float down here.
there is a third person that we have not mentioned. There is a fourth person we have not mentioned yet. His name is Prince Baron.
Oh, indeed.
Played by Timothy Dalton, and
Prince Baron.
He pops into the circular room while they are there with Prince Bolton, who and apparently Prince Bolton has stolen some kind of rock that was Prince Baron's or crystal. Is it? Not sure. Is it a crystal? I think it's a crystal. It looks kind of.
It's Bond. It was probably a crystal.
it was
no, it's probably a crystal.
And you know what's funny?
Yes.
Dale Arden says something for your eyes only, or something like that.
I thought it was interesting that they made that sort of reference in there. There are a lot of subtle things
Right,
they do reference in this movie.
Right before Dalton showed up.
There's a lot of Bond people in here. You have, like I say, you have Topol, you have Timothy Dalton, you have Max von Sydow. Who was the other? There were, I think, two others that were in Bond films. Yeah. And of course, we talked about the Blackadder connection with the Blind Blessed, and a young Robbie Coltrane is in the film as well.
Yes, indeed.
So good times. Very young. But
oh yeah.
So,
yeah.
So yeah, we kind of forgot the where he did actually go to, the kind of swamp planet, because he went there before he went to the Hawk thing, and they were doing some sort of initiation thing, and then they did some sort of battle where you're supposed to stick your hand in a log, and you might, if you stick your hand in the wrong log, you get bitten by a creature that kills you once you get bitten.
You know,
kids, don't try this at home.
That swamp planet kind of reminded me of the Dagobah system in Star Wars, just a little bit.
You think?
And then did you notice how that walkway that was around that tree kind of looked like the Ewoks village? Or
probably not an accident.
Well, that scene where they're trying to see if they get bitten, that reminds me of an episode of Brave Wilderness where he likes to get stung and bitten by everything, or maybe the Crocodile Hunter.
Crikey, bit my hand.
Not to mention that Timothy Dalton's character is more or less dressed up like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, or something like that.
Indeed.
And Richard O'Brien showed up momentarily. I liked seeing him for just moments, because I kept thinking he was going to start singing "It's Astounding."
Well, apparently you're one of the few. I was reading that apparently he did not make himself well liked on set. He didn't want to be there. No one else wanted him there.
Oh, Richard O'Brien?
I believe he was the one I read that about. Yeah. But who knows? But there were definitely, the Star Wars connections are not accidental, and I I don't know if we want to launch into that yet or later in the production part of it, but
Later in the
there is
production part
more
of
to
it, I
be
think.
said. Yes.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Hmm.
So apparently, there are several battles that happen. Not just with the not just with the Prince Baron, which that was a very interesting battle.
Yeah.
Um, so apparently, the princess Aura is being tortured by Clytus because he has somewhat tricked the Emperor Ming into believing that someone else has actually quite possibly betrayed him, so that he can do with whoever it was who helped Flash Gordon escape.
Yes.
Torture her, torture her just for the sake of torture.
Hmm.
uh,
Because he's such a pleasant individual.
well, he's jealous beyond belief. If
Right.
you believe the words of the princess.
What about torture?
Hmm.
That's why shoot our entire show starts off with that sentencing everyone to torture.
or like
Mhm.
or like his fellow companion Kayla. Um, she was like, "Believe you me, we do not enjoy doing this."
Mhm.
As she raises the whip one more time. But
Mhm.
what do we think about the various locations of the where everything is set?
Yep, you had Dagobah, you had the city in the clouds from Empire, and then you had the Empire. The Empire's like a Death Star that you were at, uh, but far more colorful at the time.
And they all end up on Tatooine. That's where we met.
What?
Oh, jeez. Uh, but yeah, it was some interesting set pieces, you know.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm sure the Ivory Tower showed up somewhere here too. So,
Mhm.
but in any case, so the Hawk people, they end up so they end up somehow in the end siding with the Flash Gordon after this
Mhm.
battle between Prince Baron,
Mhm.
which apparently there's a circular device that they are
Yeah.
teeter-tottering on with spikes that just
Mhm.
come out.
That was
And
Mhm.
actually a really cool action scene. I actually really enjoyed that fight between the two.
Mhm.
I did too. And I like the fact that Clytus tried to come and tried to say, "We are arresting you. You're coming back with us." And
Mhm.
and Flash was like, "No, we're not. Die, motherfucker!" You know,
Mhm. You
but
said it just like that.
Well, he essentially did kill him. I mean,
Mhm.
it is,
Right. Yeah, yeah, or so they thought.
well,
But yeah, it was interesting. It was they had this thing where the spikes were remote controlled, and what's his name? Volton was actually controlling the spikes. So in a sense, it wasn't just between the two. They had to deal
oh,
with this
oh, he was having fun.
bloodthirsty. Oh, he was having a good old time. That's
Yeah.
like that's what happens when you give the peanut gallery too much power.
what did you think of
Teacher
the?
wants to join us for a bit.
Oh, Hello. What did you think about the other hawk people as we started to hawkmen as they are referred, and there ended up being a lot more hawkmen than I thought there were on stage.
Well, there certainly were a lot of hawkmen.
Of course, it kind of reminded me of the scene where all the winged monkeys are flying in The Wizard of Oz. Just a little bit there as they flew towards that spaceship.
Actually, their costumes reminded me a lot of the winged monkeys from Wizard of Oz. That makes sense.
So this film was actually kind of what kind of a budget do you think that this film actually had?
Well, there was a comment of something like this was the only 27 million improvised movie. So I'm guessing the budget was somewhere in that range, or maybe they just picked a number to make it sound funny.
Well, it looks the budget was about 20 million. That was the estimated, and then apparently opening weekend it made about $3,934,030.
$3 million.
And it made a gross worldwide of 27,107,960.
Oh, at least it got its money back anyway.
Yeah,
more or less.
But
well, it depends on whether that budget included marketing.
I mean, you could actually. I mean, it does show the budget shows in the movie special effects, which though they aren't quite even. As I said, sometimes you have really cool costumes like the Imperial Troopers, and sometimes you have the Lizard Men. Who I still say those look the most ridiculous out of all the costumes that they have.
Ridiculous.
Well, I know that this film came before Superman, so this was one of the
before Superman.
Yeah, before.
No, this was 1980. Superman was 78.
Was it?
Yeah, it was 77 or 78. I think Superman 2 was 1980, wasn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is like. So how many superhero films?
Not many.
Do you think were made at this point in time?
Not many. There was.
Yeah.
I mean, most of them were done in serials between the 1930s and 60s, and then they didn't really have that many superhero films.
Not that many films. So it was basically the first two Superman movies. When did the Swamp Thing movie come out? I don't remember.
I think it was in that renaissance of late 80s, early 90s. I swear that was. Because that was the big superhero renaissance we had for a while.
I don't know about late 80s. I mean, maybe.
Batman.
If you start,
Swamp Thing.
Well, I guess if you include Howard the Duck, no.
The first.
So Batman 66 would have been before this.
That is true.
Okay, that's
right.
So
he did have Adam West's Batman.
Okay. Adam West Batman, then
the best Batman.
And I think what was the show that? Oh yes, the Superman, the Star Wars special. You'll remember that we made a point of noting that people had to wait a week for both Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk. So those shows were out. I know Toei's completely insane Spider-Man show came out before this.
Captain America. There were what about Captain America?
I think
the movies were the early '90s, but there might have been a show at this point.
There was only one, I think, in the early '90s. The other two were earlier than that.
Yes.
Sure?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, you're thinking the one that kind of had, actually, it had a really good Captain America costume. He looked just like the comics, which
yeah.
was unfortunate at the time. But
1979.
yep,
Oh, okay.
yeah, the original
So that
Captain
would have been
America
just before
films,
this.
yeah, because he had his cap cycle and didn't actually look that much like Captain America. But
His cap shark repellent.
In fact, the first one and the second one were out in 1979. So
rapid fire Captain America.
No,
because the next Captain America was directed by Albert Pyun in 1990.
Indeed.
So
Preacher, stop that.
that shit's catchy.
Preacher.
So ultimately, what did we
Stop
think
that.
of Flash Gordon as a character?
He is at the time, he is your stereotypical American hero. He was the quarterback. He was the character at the time.
Clean cut blonde quarterback in a t-shirt.
I mean,
just about as white bread as they come.
I mean, for the longest time, this was the peak of American, love, really. Football, quarterback. I mean, that stuff didn't start changing until probably the 90s. And of course, then again, some of these films, they weren't necessarily made by those types of people, but that was the kind of character that appealed. Nowadays, that kind of character is not the number one draw. So it's kind of there, but he was kind of a Captain America type. I mean, shoot. But they like to make it a big thing. I know in the comics, like early X-Men comics, I remember reading X-Men comics from the 60s, and they would talk about, like, yeah, this guy's cool. He plays football. I was like, my favorite character from the Marvel comics, Havoc, for instance. They played up how good he was because he played football.
He was just a superhero because he was a football player.
Exactly.
So to the American, well, especially since this was a film that was filmed in the UK.
Yep.
Yep.
With an Italian producer and a large amount of Italians involved, and relatively few American. Well, and then again, let's see. Max von Sydow is Swedish. Topol is from Tunisia, I believe it is.
And a British soundtrack.
Let's see. Brian Blessed, I believe, is British. Robbie Coltrane is. Yep. You got all the. yes, and Queen is very British. Well, and actually, I was just thinking it's kind of interesting. You're talking about like the football and all this kind of stuff, and it's kind of interesting that they got Queen to do the soundtrack. Of all people, it's doesn't seem like it quite jobs with the.
It's a weird collage of colors. This film, and definitely.
But it's colorful.
Yeah, is it Fifth Element colorful?
It was. Yeah.
This was an odd time for Queen. And they had just come out with Hot Space around that time. And that was their disco album. Badly timed disco album. And it had a couple of cool tracks on it. I mean, people know Body Language, and a couple other cool ones that were on that, but still, that was probably a low point for them. So it's kind of cool that they were able to pull this and make this soundtrack, and of course they came back and did the soundtrack for Highlander. Well, not but a few years later, really.
Yeah.
And that was also a cool soundtrack. But this soundtrack was rocking. It kicked ass.
I admit that main theme, the Flash theme, is one that I know quite well.
It's
Heard
one
it a
that
few
I know
times.
quite well too. I've heard it over time too at
Yep.
football stadiums and baseball stadiums and things like that. So,
Right.
but
Well,
we get to hear this song while the action is playing, do we not?
yes.
You know, it's interesting though. Talking about the timing of things and what have you, trying to do what makes sense to people at the time. I believe, as I understand correctly, Flash was originally a polo player, and they felt that that was a little dated, so they made
Oh
him a
yeah.
football star.
That's the thing, is it's all about timing. I mean, I'm
Right.
sure that if you made Flash today, he probably wouldn't be a football player.
No, they could probably still get away with it, but it would be more controversial. At the time this came out, there would not have been much controversy.
Oh yeah. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think of what they would make Flash these days. I mean, what's like the popular like everyman American thing?
There was
It'd be a Fallout fanatic or something.
there was a 1990s TV show that there was a TV show that was somewhat recent that they did of Flash Gordon. So I wouldn't mind going and checking it out just to see what kind of person they'd put. Maybe they'd actually put him as something completely different because
Actually, it'd probably be a reality star.
Maybe he'd be sort of like Chris Pratt and Chris Pratt's character in Guardians of the Galaxy, one of those like wise cracking dudes who is not super muscle. Who's not like the muscle head, but definitely ripped at the time.
I could see.
Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned that because apparently they wanted Kurt Russell for the role in this one, and he didn't really like the vibe of the movie. He thought it was too cheesy and too goofy and whatever. And then, but then he came back for a goofy space opera with Guardians 2.
Well, shoot. It says the man who did Escape from New York and Escape from LA.
Exactly.
And those aren't goofy films.
My name is Snake.
There are people who end up eating their words. Like, I know for our discussion later tonight, I had read that apparently Mickey Rooney absolutely despised the first film and trashed it, and then showed up later on in one of the other sequels.
Which I don't understand, because those sequels were terrible.
Maybe why he showed up in it.
Meanwhile, this one was banking on sequels that it never got.
Yeah, well, it should have made bank, and it didn't.
Right. Yeah.
So, was there anything else from any of the other characters that we wanted to discuss before we went on with production values?
I don't really have any character notes, really.
Yeah. Shoot, I feel like we've done most of the production values.
Most of them. But what did we what did we think of the film on a whole? Was it a well together put together film that was Oscar worthy?
Don't know about Oscar worthy.
Well,
maybe the song, a couple of aspects here and there, but
some of the soundtrack was pretty well done. But I mean, as I had said in a pre-film discussion, I do think that Queen refined their ability to make music more for Highlander, because that soundtrack was the better of the two, in my opinion. But Yeah, I don't know. Costume design was really good in places, and set design was actually pretty good in places.
In this film?
Yes, I think so. I mean, you look at the colors and everything used, and on the Blu-ray, it's amazing.
I don't know why, but I like the swamp parts of the planet for some reason. Maybe because they do remind me of the Dagobah system and the Ewoks and all that jazz.
Well, for on the production, I'll go ahead and say apparently George Lucas really, really, really wanted to make Flash Gordon, and he really wanted to make an updated sort of Flash Gordon. And he couldn't get the rights to the film because they were tied up. And so he ended up making his own Flash Gordon, which turned out to be Star Wars. So yes, he did borrow a lot from this for the Star Wars movies. And then I'm sure this movie borrowed from Star Wars because it was, because it was so successful. This is the kicker. This is the part that I love. The producer on this film, Dino De Laurentiis, first of all, signed off on Queen without having any idea who they were, which I thought that was kind of interesting. But Brandon, you will love this. Did you happen across the information on who had the rights to the film?
No, I did not.
So apparently this guy worked on the serials back during World War II or something as an illustrator or something. So it makes more sense when you think of it that way. But I find it absolutely hilarious that the reason George Lucas couldn't get the rights is because they were tied up by Federico Fellini.
Oh, I would have loved to have seen Fellini's version of Flash Gordon. That would have been great. I would have loved to see that.
So it goes from a film with middling art to a film that automatically gets a 10.
Oh my!
Now, who is Federico Fellini?
Who is Fellini? Fellini is the most artistic director. He's the only director capable of giving a 10 out of 10 from art because he is the only director that has that level of pretentiousness and art and artsiness. We'll have to do some Fellini films like 8.5. You know what though?
Well, 8.5 is
8.5 is one of those. I still have not been 100% certain I want to do Sideways. There are a lot of them, and 8.5 is one of the contenders for that list of second chance films because I hated that film. But
so basically, it's a long meandering piece about a director who's unsatisfied with life and is just kind of looking at where he is and where he's trying to go. I liked it a lot.
He is a very intense director.
And I like
La Dolce Vita, yes.
I like La Dolce Vita.
Juliet to the Spirits.
That's the only film that I have by him. I just did not know. I have not entirely watched it yet.
Well, he's
I've
worth
seen a
checking
fair number
out.
of Fellini's films. Yeah. But we have a running joke. At one time, I developed a very detailed rating system that I've kind of abandoned because it's just, I feel like going with my gut more. But
too detailed.
Art had slightly higher value than entertainment, which meant that it was the biggest chunk. So he came up with the idea that Fellini was the only one who could earn a 10. But I have said that is bullshit because Kubrick is more pretentious than Fellini, and the guy who directed A Ghost Story is more pretentious than Fellini.
Makes me scared to watch A Ghost Story.
And, you keep ragging on Sideways. I'd have to admit, Alexander Payne comes close. He comes very close. Yes.
Oh my, it's a hard one. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in his way, very, 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 very much his money hungry, Disney friendly sort of way, I would almost say George Lucas is in that club too.
Nowhere near the artistic talent, though.
Well,
You got to have talent
right,
as
but you
well as
got to admit
pretentiousness.
the pretensions there.
The way the man directs his actors, I guess you could say it's an art form. He's casting the art out of wood at the time. Oh
Right.
my gosh.
Okay. I have a winner. Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, he doesn't have the talent, but when it comes to sheer pretension,
Just don't give him a budget. Maybe he'll do better.
oh man.
Boy, that actually would be interesting to
that was
see
a-
it with so film on video, a shot on video film by him.
How about this? Tommy Wiseau redoes Flash Gordon without a budget.
Oh my.
He'd make it happen somehow.
Or shoot,
man.
Darren Aronofsky does Flash Gordon.
That would be interesting. That would be interesting because Darren Aronofsky would actually have talent.
Yes.
And pretentiousness just the same.
Although he might just tell it from God's perspective. So.
But I mean, I'm still holding out for one day Aronofsky getting Batman and doing a proper Batman film with Scarecrow as the main villain.
Yes.
Yes. That would be one of the darkest, most screwed up Batman films out there. Even more screwed up than Batman and Robin. In a good way.
Yes. Yeah, in a good way. Yeah.
Well, do we have anything more for the production value?
We need to
see. I do have to say that I liked the way the ships were actually. I liked the way the ships looked. The spaceships and for some reason I loved that little air ski thing that Flash Gordon was riding for a time. It kind of reminded me of like him on one of those Star Wars Return of the Jedi bikes, except it was more like in the daytime, and it was more of a spaceship than it was more of a air vehicle than it was, but against that backdrop of the sunset, I don't know. But yeah, the music I would have to say the soundtrack is phenomenal to me.
Oh.
Yeah, I can't really for the feel of the theme, I can't really blame Queen for any drawback. It's more the film, because they really did even when you're not looking at the main theme, I feel like they captured the spirit of that film quite well, where they've got the sci-fi creepiness. I've listened to that soundtrack to the point where I've had it memorized, because that's how I did it when I was in high school. I memorized most of them. And so I know all of the instrumental stuff.
And they also earned a BAFTA nomination for their work.
They did a good job with it. I mean, I really like the end song, and they play a little bit of that one over and over again throughout as well. A lot during some of the battle scenes. The hero, I believe, is the correct terminology. I think that's the title of the song. Matter of fact, I know it is because I just took it off of the album.
All right.
Let me make sure I got that right. Let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, hero.
So Was the acting over the top?
Yeah, mostly.
For the most part, yeah.
Was there any actor or actress that you remember the most?
Brian Blessed.
Yeah, Brian Blessed.
Okay. Does
Pretty much.
anyone have a favorite scene?
Dive! I don't know. I did like that. I was like,
I get it. I gotta say. Go ahead.
I like the fight between the two of them on the disc. And with Brian Blessed going on, like, gleefully activating all the torture devices and stuff, just enjoying it, not really caring who comes out on top. He's just like, yeah, I'll kill both of these people. It was fun.
Yeah, good times.
It was like at that point, Brian Blessed was like, shit. This film is already going to hell. I might as well make the best of it and just push a few buttons here.
Right.
I already know I'm in a shit movie. Let's see what this does. Ooh, cool! Die, motherfucker!
Yep.
But is there anything else that we wanted to go and talk about before?
No, I think we can get ready to wrap up. I think I don't have anything.
Yep, nothing leaps to mind.
Was it an entirely good movie?
Entirely?
Well, let's see. What does IMDb rate it?
I want to say it was in the
IMDb has a 6.5.
Wow.
Yeah, 6.5.
Whoa.
That's not bad on IMDb overall.
There are people that love this movie. I know that.
Yeah,
it's like I think someone earlier mentioned Ted. If I remember correctly, this was a major plot point in Ted.
It was. They even had the guy who played Flash Gordon on Ted.
And they ultimately put it in a trilogy set with Ted 1, 2, and 3. So I've seen it out there. That is definitely.
And I'm pretty sure. I want to say there were some multiple references on other Seth MacFarlane programs because I feel like he has been very vocal about being a fan. I want to say Kevin Smith has gone on the record as being a fan too.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I'm more of a fan of the Flesh Gordons, which I was actually on with the last couple of weeks, which not only has this superhero been in pop culture for years, also it has been spoofed in several softcore porn parodies called Flesh Gordon and Flesh Gordon Meets the Cosmic Cheerleaders. If you ever want to see a discussion on either one of those two, I went on with Mo the last couple of weeks, and you can see our discussions there.
It is too bad he couldn't be on to help us finish this off. But you get us instead.
We know he wanted to.
We know he wanted to too, but I think at the end of this discussion, we should. I think that's all that we have to say about this film. I think that this film was a hodgepodge. I think they tried. I think they tried to put something together. It's definitely a film that I'll have to rewatch again because it's just a lot of color. There's a lot going on. It was like the Batman versus Superman movie all over again.
Only this one was not dreary and depressing.
No, this one was colorful and entertaining to a certain extent.
It's sad because Affleck really could have been a good Batman Bruce Wayne.
Yes, he could have.
So it has this for a crazy thought. In keeping with the idea of a fractured psyche, Darren Aronofsky definitely directing all the Scarecrow-centric scenes. Scarecrow's teamed up with the Joker, and the Joker-centric scenes will be Terry Gilliam, and then Affleck can do the Batman-centered scenes. And you get 3 different disparate directorial styles in a weird mishmash of crazy. I think that'd be fun.
Oh my. And then have Flash Gordon playing in the background of each and every scene.
Actually, there is nothing wrong with that. Between either, with those two messing with your mind, you could see all sorts of stuff. You could see Deadpool riding a unicorn, and it would make perfect sense.
Now, I know that I have to go very shortly because I have to answer the door.
Uh-huh.
And as you can see, I don't have myself together very well. I kind of look a little bit like I fell apart today.
Well, on that note,
well, you dressed up for the holidays.
Yes.
On that note, why don't we tell a little bit about who we are?
All right. Okay, I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm Jake, and I am a film fan, collector, as you can kind of see a little bit in the back there, here in Central Virginia, and we sometimes do these little pre-show discussions. Mostly, I just show up on the regular show and also join Septum here on Septum Sin versus the World, which he'll tell you a little bit more about that, but it's a fun channel. I have my own nature-themed channel, Kotobuki Jake, that is very rarely updated, and because of new YouTube rules, will probably get cut before I get around to updating it.
Yes.
There we go.
All right.
I'm Septum Sin versus the World. We like physical media. We praise physical media. We collect physical media. If you want to know more, listen to our spiel later tonight.
And my name is David Streggy. I run Inside Movies Galore, as well as Delusions of Grandeur, which we are here on today, and we've just had a glorious discussion on Flash Gordon. And hopefully you enjoyed our discussion and ramblings today. Later on tonight, we will be going on about what is the director of Silent Night, Deadly Night, Brandon?
I looked it up, and now I have to look it up again. It's something. They have a director.
I have forgotten myself.
It was a film director, to be sure. It was definitely not a dog.
Oh, sweet. I'm glad that it wasn't a dog.
Maybe it was the Ginger Dead Man.
Oh, shit. Now we have to go full moon on it again.
Yeah, well, he's going back to his spot. As we see the Christmas tree.
Director Charles E. Sellier Jr.
Yeah, there we go.
So stay tuned tonight. In about 45 minutes, we will be going on about Silent Night, Deadly Night, and continuing our Christmas programming. And hopefully you have enjoyed our pre-discussion for Inside Movies Galore this discussion. So once you finish off here, go over to that channel and tune in. So thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to look for the greatest superhero of all time, Flash Gordon, in his great American hero-ness,
All right. Good
No,
night.
greatest superhero of all time. No. There we go. All right. All right.